Well, Stan, I don't know if when our next guest wrote his weird and wild short earlier this week about how the Orioles had won or tied 21 consecutive ALS East series, it might not have been because he expected that streak was going to end this week, because I think a few of us here in Baltimore would probably have to admit we thought that streak was probably going to end.
Especially after we lost the first game of the series and then faced
Povich,
Garrett Cole and
the whole
Luis
thing.
Gil. Yeah.
Not the case, as obviously the Orioles extended that to 22 series. Joining us now, one of our favorites, longtime MLB writer from The Athletic. He is Jayson Stark, and he's with us now here on GCR. Jason, were you among us thinking, hey, this probably has a good chance of being the end of the road this week?
Well, Glenn, if you injected me with a little truth serum, I would say it crossed my mind, okay? I didn't know that they were going to win that series or lose that series because I'm not that smart, but I thought if I'm going to write this, I don't think I should wait till after that series. You know what I mean?
I get it. We were all feeling the exact it's hard to quantify this, right? Because winning a bunch of series, or at least not losing a bunch of series, does not give you a World Series title. It's much like the Orioles' sweepless streak that ended a few weeks ago, right? It doesn't guarantee anything, but we know it's a statement about how good this ball club really is.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And, it's fun to go through the other teams that have done this. I asked stats to help me with that. There were a couple Big Red Machine teams. They were pretty good. There was that Braves team from the 90s and early 2000s. They won a few games. There was a Brewers team with Robin Yap, Paul Molitor back in the 90s. That was a good group. I would say that these Orioles have a long ways to go before they're the Big Red Machine. But what separates this streak from the other streaks is look at the division this was compiled in. And I was trying to update this since I wrote the piece, and I think that the AL East, in the time that this streak has been going on, other than when they play the Orioles, is a combined 121 games over 500, whereas the other teams played against divisions that were 179 games under 500 combined. So does that seem a little different to you?
Yeah, significantly.
Not apples to apples. Exactly.
That sounded, I didn't do the math immediately. Was that like a 300-game difference that you just pointed?
It's almost, 298.
Wow, that is...
No, 100. No, you're exactly right. It's 300 now.
Yep. That's unbelievable.
Because we're at 121. Yeah, good math.
That is unbelievable.
Jayson, did you by any chance get to see yesterday's game?
I was writing, Stan, but I did see a lot of it late. It was crazy.
It was crazy. I'm wondering two things. The approach that the Orioles took on Luis Gil was uber aggressive. In other words, They didn't want to let him get to 2 strikes on you. That was one thing. And I'm also wondering if the faux BS that the Yankees called by clearly having Gonzalez throw at Gunnar Henderson the night before, whether you think either of those things played a part in yesterday's total domination.
Well, I mean, I thought the approach against Luis Gil was the key to everything.
Yeah.
I know you said they didn't want to get to strike 2. It didn't look to me like they wanted to even get to strike 1.
Yeah, that was a better way to put it.
I don't remember how many guys swung at the first pitch, but it felt like everybody swung at the first fastball. And, when stuff like this happens, I never think it's just the pitcher had a bad day. I'm sure that lineup was prepared to take that approach. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that they had some indicators of when a fastball was coming based on something he did in his delivery, and they were all over it and all over him. That there's a lot that was incredible about that start, but all right, Luis Gil gives up 7 runs in 4 outs. He'd given up 7 runs in his previous 166 outs.
Wow.
Okay, he gave up 4 hits with runners in scoring position. He'd given up 5 all year in 14 starts. So that approach changed everything about that game because it forced the Yankees to play catch-up. The other stuff, the hit-by-pitch stuff, like there's no way that they hit Aaron Judge intentionally, but we know how baseball works.
Yeah. Real quick, do you think that scouting, the way the Orioles approach Gil, what does that bode for him moving forward? Won't his next couple starts be fascinating to watch?
Absolutely. He's trying to get him through the season.
Yeah.
Is one of the most important challenges that the Yankees face. I mean, it's one of the reasons that getting Garrett Cole back now is so important because, like, he spent 2.5 months having to be Garrett Cole. Now, they've got to watch his innings. They've got to watch his workload, and it really wouldn't shock me if they backed off on him, maybe even next start, because I don't think that was necessarily a sign of a guy hitting the wall, but his command was very different than anything we'd seen before. There are two teams playing. I used to tell my wife that all the time when she was coaching, right? The great teams don't let you do what you like to do, and that was part of it. I think they shook him up by being as aggressive as they were and being and getting on the fastball the way they did. But he's a pivotal figure in the AL East moving forward. You're absolutely right.
Jayson Stark from The Athletic is with us here on GCR. Jason, we're talking about Yankees pitching. On the flip side, as great of a week as it was for the Orioles, in this series, they didn't have a starter go 5 innings. And we acknowledge that, like, Burns and Grayson Rodriguez didn't throw, and Dean Kramer looks like he's going to be coming back soon. But how much did that, on the flip side, as good as the series was, sort of scream out, hey, the Orioles have to, with Bradish sideline, they're going to have to acquire a starter before the deadline if they really want to have a run at a World Series?
Well, I mean, that is the question right now. 2 weeks ago, if you'd asked me if the Orioles might make a big payout for a starting pitcher, I'm not so sure I would have said yes.
Right.
Doesn't seem like that's the way Mike Elias does business. But when you lose 2 guys to Tommy John surgery in 2 weeks, it changes the equation. Like, we've just watched the Orioles for a week play the best team in the National League and the best team in the American League going in, right? And did they look like a team that could easily beat either of those teams or anybody else in a postseason series? I think the answer is yes. Mm-hmm. So, okay, the window to win a World Series opens now. And do they need another starting pitcher to do that? I think they probably do. And then the other question I would have is, how comfortable do you feel with Craig Kimbrell at the end of a postseason game? Yep. Ask the Phillies that question.
What's fascinating to me about Kimbrell is last year I watched him pretty carefully. Once the Orioles acquired him, I went back and looked at his numbers. Last year he threw 68 innings, struck out 95 batters, and hadn't thrown that many innings since 2018. When he really ran up against his blip about a month ago or 5 weeks ago, he was on pace to throw 90 innings. Since they've backed off of him, he's been really pretty damn good.
Yeah, the other night obviously didn't go well, right?
No,
but
of course
no.
Yeah.
Well, I live in Philadelphia, as you guys know, and I saw a lot of him last year. And he had long stretches last year where he was really good.
Yep.
Here's the problem. I think we all have in our memory banks what Craig Kimbrell used to be. And when he has these stretches where he's really good, if he pitches for your team, you're trying to convince yourself he's found that again. Mm-hmm. And that's not true. He's not that guy anymore. His stuff isn't quite the same. And his delivery can get out of whack so fast. It's an issue. He clearly wore down as the season went on last year. I'm sure that if you watch him, it gives you the best chance to avoid that this year. But the big innings can steamroll on that guy with one at bat. Mm-hmm. And I still think he's a valuable member of any bullpen. But when you think about some of the great closers who have gone out there in October, is he still that? It feels like in his whole career, he's never quite been that in October, right?
Yeah.
That's fair. That's completely fair. Jason, just another couple minutes of Jayson Stark here on GCR. I realize this question doesn't actually matter, but I'll give it to you anyway. You referenced, they just took 2 out of 3 from both the Phillies and Yankees. Today, are the Baltimore Orioles the best team in baseball?
I know that the standings might say otherwise, but when you just watch them play, and you look at every underlying metric, I think they are. I mean, especially the team on the field.
Right.
I remember talking to you at spring training, Glenn, and saying when you watch them, even take their kids on the road, it felt like you were watching a Futures game. I mean, the array of talent everywhere on the diamond, not just in Baltimore, but in AAA, is unlike anybody else runs out there. It's so dynamic. It's so electric. It's intimidating. The pitching staff is another story. It's obviously not the best staff in baseball, but are they the best team in baseball? They've got the best run differential. They've dominated the best division in baseball. They've crushed winning teams, right? Look at the record against teams 500 or better. They can beat anybody. So I would say the answer is yes. But I think a lot of how this season turns out will definitely be determined by the deadline. And that means by what they do and what the other good teams do.
Jayson, I'm only asking this because you're old enough to, like me, and you're younger than me, I know, but to remember the 1983 season and the World Series. I wrote a piece last week, and at the outset, I said it's not apples to apples, but I wrote the piece on the premise that could Cade Povich be the 2024 version of Mike Boddicker? And I wrote that after he had shut out the Atlanta Braves for 6 innings. Your thoughts on the opportunity that Povich has in front of him? And I know he's not as finished a product as Boddicker was, but yet Boddicker only had thrown 38 innings in the major leagues in 3 cups of coffee in 80, 81, and 82. And then Mike Flanagan's injury really gave him an opportunity that he ran with.
Yeah, I think opportunity is a great word to use, Stan, because when your team's down 3 starters for the year, it's an opportunity for everybody to take that step. And it's really early to try to assess what Cade Povich is going to be. Yeah. There's no disputing that the stuff is crazy good, and the swing and miss is undeniable. But baseball is hard. The big leagues are hard. It's going to be really fascinating to see what he does over the next few weeks, because we talked about how Mike Elias doesn't like to overpay, right? And at the deadline, and I don't know. Do you see a lot of difference-making starters who are going to be out there that you could get if you don't overpay? I don't see that, and so there's certainly a chance for a guy like this to make the general manager say, "We're good."
Mm-hmm.
The one name I wanted to run by you, again, trying to find someone that might be able to be helpful but might not break the bank. Does Eric Fetty fit that bill for you, Jayson Stark?
He's a pretty interesting guy because, I never thought that when he was in Washington, but he's really been a shining light in it's 2 months. He's not a top of the rotation starter, but could he start a playoff game, a game 3 or game 4? I think he could be that. In terms of just pure raw stuff, he's not Jesus Luzardo, he's not Garrett Crochet, but there's worse options. And the great position that the Orioles are in is I would think he's a guy who would be reasonably priced. And I think the template for any deal that Mike would make is obviously the Corbin Burns deal. Find a couple of guys who would be top 10 prospects anywhere else, but are completely blocked from playing here, and then deal them for that piece or pieces that you need. So, that part of the puzzle fits, I think.
Jason, last question I have for you. I would be remiss if Willie Mays' name wasn't mentioned, but I'll only mention it in comparison to because I think he was the greatest player I ever saw, but I'm mentioning it in comparison to Gunnar Henderson as potentially the best Oriole of all time.
Shoo.
I know it's early in a long career, but your assessment of the uniqueness of Gunnar Henderson.
Okay, I'm trying to think through the best Oriole of all time argument, and the problem is that to be the best Oriole of all time, don't you have to play for the Orioles as long as Ripken and Brooks?
Yes.
And
yes.
I don't know how confident I am that that's going to happen. He does have Scott Boras for an agent.
Yeah.
But if the question is about skill set and you're invoking Willie Mays, you're clearly talking about the power, speed, defense combination, and he's got that. I mean, we're just talking about how hard baseball is, especially if you're a young player. Enos Harris and I have a big piece in The Athletic today about how offense has fallen to nearly historic lows and how hard it is for everybody to hit, with a lot of good hitters talking about how defense has evolved, outfield defense has evolved, and pitch mixes and pitch labs, and just how hard it is to hit. It doesn't seem that hard when Gunnar Henderson's batting. Okay, so that tells you all you need to know.
And he's got the killer instinct that I see
he does.
very rarely.
And as Stan alluded to earlier, the way that he handled all of the BS this week in New York, he could not have handled any of that any better.
That kid's got his act together, doesn't he?
Sure does. Yeah. Jason, is there anything else we can plug for you, my friend?
Well, I just got a chance to plug my big story about offense. There's a lot of fun data in there and quotes from players, executives. Bruce Bochy sneaked in there. Yesterday, I wrote Willie Mays by the numbers. There's no numbers like Willie Mays' numbers, so check that one out. All in The Athletic.
I'm a Starkville guy, too, myself.
I'm a Starkville guy, too. If you get a chance on our website, PressBoxOnline.com, Jim Henneman wrote a piece, a reflection piece on Willie Mays that I think you'd really enjoy.
I can't wait to read it. Thanks for putting that out, Stan.
Jason Stark, always appreciate you, sir. Thank you for spending the time with us this morning.
Hey, I love talking to you guys. Thanks.